So it is my great pleasure to be able to talk to you today about ethical aspects of data collection and about the software, the Ethiktool that we developed in this context with this wonderful team that you can see here on the slide. So my name is Alexandra Bendixen. I'm an experimental psychologist by background, and since 2018 I am chairing the Ethics Review Board at Chemnitz University of Technology. We are a rather large university-wide ethics review board. We handle about 240 proposals per year. And in the process of formalizing the setup of that review board, we were thinking about how to streamline the processes and how to simplify the composition of ethics applications for the researchers and then in turn the review for the board. And so since 2020, we have been developing the Ethiktool by concept and now also by software. And this is what I would like to show you today and how it really sits at the intersection of ethics and data processing aspects. So I know that many of you are here more from a data processing background and point of view. So I would like to say a few words about what I mean by ethics review. So as we all know and surely agree upon, when you collect research data or actually any type of data from humans, this comes with a lot of responsibilities. There are legal responsibilities, but there are also beyond the law ethical and moral responsibilities. And many of those responsibilities are formalized. Of course, we have applicable laws. We have a certain formalized code of conduct on how we should perform our science. And there's also huge bodies of national and international ethics guidelines on what we should respect, the principles that we should respect when we work with human participants. And so the hallmark of all these guidelines is that the priority of all considerations is the well-being of the participant, so of the person who's being studied or whose data is being collected. Now, unfortunately, that hasn't been the case throughout the history of science, so therefore it's all the more important that we take care of this today. And actually, what I refer to when I say ethics in this presentation really is centered around the well-being of the participant or other persons who are directly involved in the research. So that can be the researchers themselves or bystanders who happen to be at the place where the research is actually being conducted. Of course, ethics has many more dimensions. So we also have the so-called dual use topic. So whether the results of the research can be used or even abused for several contexts beyond the one that was originally intended. This is very important, but it's outside of the scope of today's presentation. So I will really focus on the well-being of the people involved in the research and particularly those people whose data is being collected. Now, at many research institutions, there is a local ethics review board in place whose purpose is to assist researchers in their judgment of ethical challenges and possible ethical pitfalls that are involved in the research they are planning. So a lot of this work between the researcher and the ethics review board is about identifying risks that might be at stake and then finding ways of mitigating those risks. And if they cannot be reduced, then of communicating the risks to the participants who volunteer to take part in the research. So that's basically the core of what ethics review boards are about. And in order to facilitate this reflection and discussion process about what are the risks and how can they be overcome, most ethics review boards offer templates, classically PDF templates or Word templates, in which the researchers answer certain queries about their research, and then the board can, on the basis of these answers, can discuss the ethical issues amongst themselves or with the researcher, depending on how the process goes. Now, this is also where data handling comes into play, because of course, performing ethically correct research with human participants also involves taking proper care of their data, and there are a lot of risks involved with improper data handling, as I'm sure you're all aware of, because this is what you do on a daily basis. So like not properly anonymizing data that is sensitive to the person, or like that where risks might be inflicted if, let's say, their political attitudes or their health status is shared beyond the realm of the research where it was promised to be taken or to be recorded in an anonymized manner. So these are very obvious risks. They're of course not the only risk. There are more dimensions to ethics than whether the data are handled, but it's a very important type of, or very important part of research ethics with human participants. Now, at some institutions, the ethics review board handles all of this. At some institutions, there is a division of labor between the data protection officers who take care more of the data processing part, and the ethics review board that takes care of other aspects of ethical interaction with human participants. But as I said, there are also some places where this is more closely intertwined. So what I'm telling you about today is how we are handling it at Chemnitz University of Technology, and about how we have put it into our software that is free to be used by other boards as well. But of course, whether your local ethics review board intends to use the software or not is up to them to decide. But the general principles underneath the software are hopefully interesting to everyone, also to those whose local ethics board may decide against using that software. Okay, so having said that, I would like to tell you more about the software project, the Ethiktool. So the key idea, as I said, was to facilitate the whole process. So to facilitate the process of how ethics proposals are composed via software-based guidance. And so the idea is that we provide with the software some context sensitivity. So we ask the first question, and then the next question that is being asked depends on the answer of the researcher to the first question. So a classical decision tree, if you will. Such a decision tree also underlies any more classical form of ethics proposal composition, but having a software is of course easier for implementing intricate connections between certain questions and certain answers. So this is one thing that the software can provide. It automatically checks whether the answers to different questions are consistent with one another, or whether a question even needs to be asked in the first place or not, because it might be relevant or not, depending on what the person has answered to another question. In the end, the software will compose both the ethics application and all the documents that are handed out to the participants, so where they are being informed about the research, where they give their consent to participating in the research. And this also includes a GDPR-compliant data privacy statement and the consent to data processing. So this is really where the interaction takes place. We have a project website that you're free to visit and check out, but more importantly, we have an open source software that is there to be explored and used. So I will show you the software in a live demo in a minute. But first, let me point out some features that were important to us when we designed the software. So first of all, I already said it's open source, so it can be freely used by anyone. The key idea, as I said, is to ask step-by-step questions about the research process. And so this also involves the data that are being collected, but also many other aspects, as you will see. Then, as the researcher fills their entries into the software, they get live feedback on things that are still missing or things that are inconsistent with one another. They see a live preview of their ethics proposal and also of all the documents, including the data privacy statement. And the software also is available in 2 languages, so you can at any point in the process switch between German and English. The aims that we pursue with the software are to facilitate the composition of such proposals for applicants by avoiding questions that are actually unnecessary, or by clarifying terms right there, as opposed to some explanatory documents that need to be put next to the classical templates. Now, when proposal composition is easier for the applicants, this in turn also facilitates the proposal review for the board members, because they don't need to take care of inconsistencies or things that might be in conflict with one another. They can really focus on the ethically relevant issues that are contained in the proposal, and whether everything is from an ethical point of view handled as optimal as it should be. The software is supposed to reduce errors and inconsistencies in the proposals. It will create a certain standardization of proposals, and it also leads to a transparency of the review principles, because once you put something into software algorithms, of course, everything needs to be very clear cut, which path is currently followed, and then it's like one-to-one mapping of which question needs to follow next after this answer has been given, and that makes the review process very transparent. We had this idea and a first prior version of the software already quite some time ago. So since mid-2021, we are using a prior version of the software at TU Chemnitz, and this really led to a substantial reduction of load for our ethics review board. And the ethics applicants really told us that they appreciate the guidance they receive through the software. They're more reassured about the correctness of their answers or the consistency of their answers, as you will see in a minute. So based on these positive effects that we observed at TU Chemnitz, we managed to secure funding by the Volkswagen Stiftung for developing that software further and adapting it for use at other sites. And now we are almost there. So by next year, the Ethiktool will be provided completely free of charge to all interested ethics review boards. For that, we teamed up with the so-called ZPIT, the Leibniz Institute for Psychology. That is a research institution that provides infrastructure for different aspects of the research process, and they decided to make the Ethiktool as one part of their general offer. So for in a continuous manner, the Ethiktool will be provided to anyone interested free of charge, and there are already other ethics review boards beyond our own who are using the software. Before I show you how it actually works, let me tell you a few technicalities about the backend. So it's a web-based software. It's basically compatible with any browser, any device. It's accessible at ethiktool.org. The backend is mainly based on PHP, HTML code, some JavaScript, some CSS. So no big magic. Actually, the main effort into the software really went into designing that logic and setting up a system that has a good consistency check and good guidance of the people throughout the process of putting everything that is being asked together. The software itself runs on a server by the ZPIT, but that server doesn't store any of the data. So all the data are stored locally on the applicant's device. So of course, while you fill your proposal, there is some communication between the local device and the ZPIT server. But in the end, the person who fills the proposal needs to download their ethics proposal, and nothing is centrally stored. The way this is downloaded then comes an XML file plus a PDF file that can be used for the ethics review and for use by the participants. Okay, so far so good. Now let's check the real thing. So I would like to demonstrate the software to you. You should now see the Ethiktool in action in my browser. And so first of all, I'm switching to English. And now, as you see, you have the option of loading a previous proposal, but today let's set up a new proposal, and then you can select which ethics review board you belong to. We will choose the test ethics committee for now because we don't actually want to fill a real proposal, just a demo proposal. And so my file name will be test proposal for today. I generate this proposal, and now the software opens up all the points that I need to fill. And you see the exclamation marks where, well, obviously everything still needs to be filled. This will later tell me where there is still a need for working up on. So let's go through it together. So this is a test proposal. Oops, sorry. And we are filling a new proposal. we start with a short proposal. So this is a distinction that will become relevant later on. There are projects where not many or no ethical risks are involved. These can be reviewed as a short proposal, but there can also be more risk involved, and then one would ask for a more extended full proposal. But let's start with the easy version. We want to begin the data collection as soon as possible. We want to end the project, let's say, summer next year. Then you need to tell about the funding sources. Let's say my professorship is paying for it, so I'm heading the cognitive systems lab. So this would be where the money comes from. And then you need to fill some very obvious things like name and contact data of the person who is asking for the proposal. This is not yet groundbreaking, but of course, whenever you file a proposal somewhere, you need to enter such basic data. So now it becomes more interesting. So for instance, one part of ethics review is whether there is a conflict of interest for anyone involved because they have a personal interest or they're not neutral with respect to the outcome of the research. In this case, I have no conflict of interest. I am neutral, and then I have to say who gave me advice. So I could, for instance, disclose here that I was already talking to the data protection officer or the department around that. So then the ethics committee immediately knows that there has been some crosstalk, and so this part is already covered. But let's say here that I have not received consulting yet. Then I need to say whether similar projects have been reviewed before. For simplicity, I'm saying no to all of that. I have to say whether any medical aspects are involved. Again, for simplicity, let's choose no. And now I have to, first of all, in free text, describe the idea of my project, what I'm planning to do. I will not have you watch my my entries here now, so in order not to have you spend time on watching me type. So this will then, of course, be a more extensive summary. But let's go to the more relevant parts. So here I have to list who are the contributors of the project. And so I first edit my own entry. Let's say I'm leading this project. And then the questions are, who is collecting the actual data? Who is the contact person for the participant? And who is responsible for data processing from the GDPR perspective? So let's say I'm the responsible person, and let's say someone else is doing the actual data collection. So this is a coworker of mine. And I'm doing this only that you can later see how the different roles of the people play out in the documents that are being generated. So let's say that person is collecting the data and is the one who is the contact person for the participants. Okay, so, and now comes the actual, let's say the actual flesh of the proposal. So I have to define how many studies, how many groups, how many time points I'm measuring. I chose the easiest structure now that is possible, one study, one group, one time point. And now I have to say, who are my participants? And so again, I'm choosing the ethically easiest option. Everybody is adults, so they can give their voluntary consent themselves. Everyone is healthy. There is no upper age limit. Then I'm being asked about the participants, whether the data are collected in a closed group. This is very important. As you all know, from a data processing perspective, if I'm working in a closed group, then properties such as the age of a person can be sufficient for identification of that person in retrospect. Whereas when I'm conducting the research in a completely free group, then the age itself doesn't tell you, it can in no way tell you who the person was. So I say no here, no closed group. How am I recruiting? I'm using mailing lists and posters and flyers, and then I can proceed to the next page. Now, this is interesting both for ethics and for data processing. Am I informing my participants in advance that they are participating in a study? So here I would like to demonstrate you the context sensitivity of the software. So if I'm saying yes here, then it will ask me next, to what extent am I informing them? Are they fully informed, or am I hiding something from them? Or am I even telling them something in advance that is wrong, that I'm gonna only later tell them that this was not the case? And depending on what I click, if I say fully informed, I'm done with this tab. But if I say I'm hiding something, or I'm deceiving them about something, I have to say answer the next question of whether I'm debriefing them afterwards. And so hopefully I'm saying yes, I will debrief them, but of course, from an ethical point of view, it really depends on the research question. So the most preferable option is, of course, I inform everyone about everything in advance, but there can be research contexts where this is not possible, because the topic of study would not be possible to investigate if everyone is priorly informed about everything. So this is why the tool allows you here to justify why you're choosing this or the other option. And then the ethics review's job is to judge those justifications and decide whether it's in this particular context ethically permissible to do that, or whether it's not permissible to do that. Okay, so let's say we're going back to fully informing everyone, and we are again done on this tab. Now, the next question is about whether people can give their free consent. I mean, I could inform someone, but they're still in some way forced to do that, which would be ethically problematic, of course. So being informed is only one part of it. The other part is actually participating in a voluntary manner. And that applies both to the participation and to the data collection part. So we say everything is voluntary, and then the question is, how is the consent given, in writing, electronically, orally, or other options? Say we give that in writing. Then I have to say whether after having given consent, is it possible to withdraw that consent at any point in time? Again, yes would be the ethically desirable option. If you say no, description and justification has to be given for that, and the ethics committee will judge whether this is acceptable or not. So we say yes here, and now we have the data collection tab. This is of course now even clearer, where data processing and ethics are working together. So what are the data collections that are used for acquiring data? You simply observe participants, or you might make instrumental measurements of them, of their heart rate, or I mean, there are many different options, and so you need to choose those that apply, and then the Ethiktool will respond accordingly. So let's say I'm here measuring response times, which would be a rather simple technique and not involve any health data or any identifiability. And then the next question is, what am I exposing my participants to? So say I'm just presenting some stimuli, like auditory scenes, or let's say we're using speech stimuli that they have to understand and then respond to. But you can see that there are many other possibilities. I might put them under physical strain because I have them jog on a running wheel, or whatever is happening in the research can be laid out here, and then the committee can check whether this involves risk or not. Another data relevant question, so will you add individually traceable data from other sources? Let's say you're working with clinical groups and you want to retrieve their medical diagnosis from their doctor, then you would need to answer yes here. And then, of course, a lot of questions would follow about how are the two types of data linked, and so the data handling is obviously then much more complicated than if you simply say, no, I'm only recording data myself. Are project contributors present during data collection? That is important for risk mitigation. Like, would you notice that a person is too charged at the moment, so that they're, let's say, physically overcharged? If you're present, you have different ways of responding to that than if they are doing it on themselves in a separate room where nobody is present. And then you need to say how long the whole thing lasts. Let's say we are measuring for an hour. 45 minutes. Data collection, 15 minutes break. Okay, and while I'm filling all that, you might have noticed that the preview on the right is filled up with information. So whatever I type in here is immediately transferred to the preview of the proposal document. And underneath the preview of the proposal document, there would be a preview of participant documents. It's not there yet here because I chose short proposal and no participant documents are being generated, but I will show you in a minute how that goes. What I also would like to point out is the error checkbox here on the top. On this page, it tells me there is no missing or incorrect entries, but let's proceed to the next page. And here it will tell me that several things are still missing, or some things might be incorrect, that they would be flagged in red. There is nothing red right now, so there's just missing input. I have to say, what are the burdens that can happen to people? And for instance, intimate contents, that's again something that is very much at the heart of data processing. So am I asking questions that invade their privacy, such as about their sexual preferences, about political beliefs, illegal behaviors they might have conducted? So that would be a reason for the ethics committee to have a closer look, but also, of course, a reason to the data protection authorities to have a closer look. And that's, as I already said multiple times, that's one of the key points that we had when designing that there is so much interplay between data processing and the actual, the ethical points of how the research is conducted and the actual research question. So basically, the researchers come with their question, and sometimes they need a little bit of guidance for finding the paths of where this actually leads into possible data processing issues that go beyond the fact that the person might feel emotionally stressed by being asked such questions. So that's more the ethical part, how much distress might be caused by answering questions like that. But then, of course, comes the data processing part of how a risk be inflicted on the person by the fact that such data has been collected about them. Okay, since my toy example here for the moment is a simple speech comprehension and response experiment, I don't have burdens of any of this type. And again, then here, it's asked about not just burdens, but also risks. There can also be risks that are more related to being emotionally distressed, or physical integrity might be threatened, but also like social, economic, political risks. For instance, for insurance contracts, if a certain health condition becomes obvious to more than just the researcher. So those issues that you all know very well about. Let's put no for the demonstration. No, we will later look at what happens in other cases. Then there might be risk for the researchers or for uninvolved bystanders. That is not the case here. And we also don't expect incidental findings. And then we are asked how we are compensating our participants for the time and energy they're investing. There are again different options. The classical thing would be to give them course credit or financial compensations. And then if you give financial compensation, the question is, what is if they withdraw early? Do they get the full compensation? Do they get a partial compensation or nothing at all? And the ethically desirable option is, of course, that they're compensated at least partially, if not fully, so that they can really freely withdraw and don't feel implicit pressure of keeping on. Okay, and when I have answered that, then for this, that's basically the simplest type of proposal that can be generated with the Ethiktool, a short proposal without participant documents. That would be done now. And so one could complete this proposal and say, okay, so I confirm that everything is correct, what I entered. I have no ethics committee member that has a conflict of interest. And I have taken note of the processing of the proposal. And then I could download this proposal and send it to my ethics committee. And it will tell me here in this part, where do I need to send it and what should I check before I actually send it. Okay, so that would be a super abbreviated review procedure. And that does not contain participant documents. Therefore, it also does not contain the GDPR data privacy statement. But I assume that for all of you, it's much more interesting to see a proposal where the data privacy statement is contained. So we do offer to researchers to generate the participant documents, even if the ethics committee in some cases does not want to see them. You should, of course, always have participant documents, so even if the ethics committee doesn't review them, one should still generate ones, and so the researchers can get assistance with their participant documents by the Ethiktool. So simply by choosing yes rather than no here. And as you can see, when I change this, then before everything was filled, if I say yes here, then the exclamation marks in multiple pages come back, because for generating participant documents, the Ethiktool needs to know much more than we just entered. You can imagine that. So for instance, we haven't yet entered any details about data processing yet, and this of course needs to be done in order to generate any GDPR compliant statement. So now, of course, as an applicant, I would wonder, oh, what do I need to answer here? And then the entry, the error feedback field comes into play. So it tells me I have to answer the question about the project title for the participant documents, because I might give the documents the same title as I have for my research project, but also the project title could be too complicated. For simplicity, let's say it's identical. Okay, and now, since I'm now generating participant documents, let's first scroll down here in the preview, on the preview side. So I still have the proposal. We already filled that before, but now, in addition to that proposal, we have a study information sheet, and further down we have a consent form to study and data processing, and even further down we will have a data privacy statement once we have entered information for that. So for the study information sheet, I need to tell the Ethiktool various things that I hadn't told in advance. So for instance, what are my inclusion and exclusion criteria? What type of participants am I measuring? It already entered automatically that the person needs to be 18 years old. That is what I entered up here. And I might specify further inclusion criteria or say there are none. But since I'm investigating in this toy example, I'm investigating auditory research, I would at least like to specify that the persons have normal hearing status. So let's say I put as an exclusion criterion that you need hearing aids or cochlear. You need a hearing aid or cochlear implant. So I want to study people with normal hearing status. And so once I enter this, it is automatically transferred to that sheet. I'm not having any further inclusion criteria, and the rest is already filled. Now, participant information, I need to say, before I only had to say that I am informing them. Now I need to say, how am I informing them? Say, informing them in writing. For the consent, I already said they are giving consent. How are they giving consent? But now I need to state, what am I doing with the data in case somebody withdraws during participation? So I have several options to choose from. For instance, if somebody withdraws, I immediately collect all their data and will not include that, or I will use the data collected up to that point for the analysis. Now, from a data protection point of view, you may immediately object and say, but that's not okay, because withdrawal should always be possible. Yes, of course, for personal data, so data that can be related in an identifiable manner to a person, of course, that must be possible. But in research, we also collect a lot of anonymous data, and for that, it can sometimes be scientifically better to keep and analyze that, ensuring that it's fully anonymous. Say you're doing a long-term study and you want to investigate when people drop out in the training or so. If you only use the data of those who sticked up to the very end, you will have a very biased judgment of the success of your long-term treatment, if you will. Whereas if you keep the data in the analysis pipeline of those who withdrew earlier, only the anonymous data, of course, then that gives a scientifically more accurate answer of how the whole process went and how people did or did not improve as a function of your long-term training. So therefore, multiple options here. It's also possible that the participant can decide whether the data are allowed to be used, or you keep it just for documentation purposes in terms of good scientific practice, but you will not use it. So several options that can be chosen here. I chose that the data will be deleted and not be included, and you can see that what it says here is adapted to what people have chosen here. So in the end, you have a fully consistent study information sheet. Okay, I stick with that answer now. The data will be used for the analysis that refers to the anonymous part. Now I need to explain to my participants how the procedure goes. Again, I will not have you watch my typing, just so you know that something needs to be entered here. I already entered my measurement techniques. Am I handing out devices to participants? Where is the study taking place? That's of course important for telling people in advance where they need to come, and everything else is already fine. Now, compensation. Before, I only said they are receiving financial compensation. Now, if I'm informing them, of course, I need to tell them how much do they receive. So let's say I give them 12 euros per hour. Then this will also be transferred. And then it asks, how am I technically doing that? Because that is, again, an intersection to the data processing part. If I'm paying them immediately on site, I might not need any personal information, or I might need the name because they signed that they received it. If I'm saying I'm paying that by a bank transfer, it's very obvious that I need to record their bank account number. So that affects the data processing. Okay, now study information. Again, I'm only entering a little bit of dummy text, or let's say I'm using the template here because it just says, thank you for your interest. I'm putting what we are studying here. I use the template for the advantages. We are studying speech comprehension. And I also use the template for the disadvantages, just for getting to the more interesting part quicker. Okay, then there are a couple of legal aspects. Do we want a liability clause? Do we want something about participant insurance? Do we want to tell them about the experimental devices, that their usage is at own risk? And do I want to tell them something about accident insurance? These are, of course, things that are aspects that need more thinking than me just clicking here now. But I want to get to the data privacy part because I assume that this is what most of you are most interested in. So basically, for generating the data privacy statement, you have the option of indicating everything within the Ethiktool. This means that the Ethiktool checks whether personally relevant data are recorded, collected or not. And if yes, then it will generate a privacy statement. You can also say that I want to add a separate GDPR-compliant statement because I already had support outside of the Ethiktool, or I asked my data protection authorities and there is no personalized data, it's only anonymous data, I don't need a privacy statement, or I want to sort this out in a later time. But for showing you what the Ethiktool does, I choose the first option here, so I want to clarify everything within the Ethiktool. Now, the Ethiktool tells me that now it needs to check whether personal data are processed, and it tells me, gives me a lot of advice on how this should be done. So I have taken note of that. Then I'm asked, who carries responsibility? Is it only my institution at which I am recording the research? Is it a different institution? Is it two institutions together? If I choose, for instance, that multiple institutions carry responsibility jointly, the Ethiktool will say that it cannot create a data privacy statement in this case because it needs some interaction and crosstalk between the two institutions, and that is not possible to put into software. But if the responsibility is only with my institution, then the software will comply and generate something. And then again, Same logic for the next question. Am I sharing personal data outside the realms of the GDPR? If I say yes to that, the Ethiktool will say, I can't generate a statement because it's too complicated. Please go visit your data protection officer. But if I'm saying no, I'm not sharing data outside of the European Economic Area, then it will do that. Okay, and now the Ethiktool is willing to start generating a data privacy statement, and which will appear further down here. And first of all, before it starts, it tells me what I already answered, what makes it likely that I might be processing personal data. And the only thing that I answered already that makes this likely is the compensation. I'm paying a financial compensation, and I have to think about the fact that I might be processing personal data for participants to confirm that they have received the money. And so if I do that, then I'm obviously processing names, and they're stored at the financial department at the university somewhere. So I am, with high clarity, collecting personal data. And so this is one of the cross checks that we have in the software. But before we worry about the compensation, we need to worry about the research data themselves. Are they person related? And since I said I'm presenting speech stimuli and collecting response times, I can say with quite some confidence that the type of research data I'm collecting here, they cannot be related to individual persons. Then, of course, I might label them in an unintelligent way, making them connectable to individual persons. So if I say I'm labeling the data with participants' names, which of course I shouldn't be doing, but technically the option is there because some people do that, and so they should be warned that this is not a good idea. Here it says it should generally be avoided, then it needs some justification why this is intended. And so this should also kind of start some reflection process in researchers who might not have thought about that before, whether they could find a different way of labeling their data in order not to be so very obviously relatable to individual persons. So you could use a code in the project, or you could say I'm reusing a code that is already available from outside the project, but what we usually do is we give codes in the project, and they are assigned by the project contributors, and then the question is, what type of code is that? Is there some allocation list that is stored? So do I keep the information that this or that person was number 4, or am I completely free of that? I'm only giving codes for labeling data sets, and there is no way of backtracing who was who. And this is, of course, from a data protection or data anonymization perspective, that's the preferable option. But in some research projects, when you want to study the same people again several weeks later, this might not be feasible. So you might have to use one of the other options. And the Ethiktool will accommodate any of the options and generate a GDPR-compliant statement as a function of that. Do I use a separate code? No, I'm not. Is the labeling of the research data related to any other purpose? So no other purpose, only for answering the research question. Or if I say, yes, I use the same codes for issuing the compensation, it will show me that this is incorrect. So I chose above that the code only serves for labeling the data sets, and then I can't say now that I'm also using it for issuing the compensation. So I'm warned of inconsistencies that I'm giving. So let's say I have no further purpose, so the labeling doesn't serve any further purpose, but I still remember from the warning up here that I might be processing personal data for other purposes. And yes, now this is the next question that is being asked. Is there further purposes for which personal data are processed? And yes, I need to process personal data for issuing the compensation. I need the name of the person. And in our particular case, we also need the date of birth, whatever the administration regulations say what needs to be stored about people who receive money. And so now, because now it's clear that I'm processing personal data, here comes the annex on data processing, which starts with the usual GDPR acts that need to be referred to. And then it says who's the responsible institution, who's the responsible person in the project, who's the responsible data protection officer. And then it says here that personal data are processed for the purpose of issuing the compensation, name, date of birth. Then it tells me that the research data themselves are anonymous. They cannot be mapped to an individual person at any time. And generally, data are not transferred. I already answered that above. It doesn't say yet anything about data anonymization because I haven't answered these questions yet. So when are personal data for the issuing the compensation deleted? For my lab, I could say I'm deleting them immediately after the purpose is fulfilled, but for payment verification, another body at my university will store the receipts of the of issuing the compensation. So I choose this option, and then I need to say who has access to this data. So let's say that the person who's actually recording the data in the lab and handing out the money, they have access. So this is my colleague that I entered further up, and also some non-project contributors, so the finance department. And since this is a free text field, I can enter more information here. So I could say here that their purpose is storing the receipts to inform my participants more extensively. Okay, and so this is now filled here in the anonymization part, and then I would be done. Everything else is standard, that the right to withdraw as long as personal data are still there, all the rights that you have as a participant, and whom you can contact for questions. So basically, from these selections that the researchers made, we now have a full statement on data processing. We have the consent form here, which says I was informed that personal data are collected, and how and to whom I can express my withdrawal of consent. So that is basically the functionality that we offer. As you see, there is one further final point that needs to be addressed here, and that will also have a back effect on the information form and also on the data processing annex. That is how data are being reused, because for now we were only talking about how we are using them within the research project. But I might also be sharing my data with others for them to reuse it. So I can again choose yes or no here. If I choose no, I have to say whether I am myself planning to reuse them for anything. If I choose yes, then I need to say in what way am I sharing them? Am I making them completely public? Am I making them available under certain usage conditions or under very strict regulations depending on the sensitivity of the data? So here everything is anonymous. I might make them publicly available by using, let's say, it's Zenodo or OSF or the Research Data Center at the ZBIT, or any other way of sharing them. And that again will affect here the data protection and data use part so that participants are fully informed. Okay, so that's the idea. And as you can see, some of the things still need to be thought through and decided by the researchers. So for instance, saying here that the research data themselves are fully anonymous, that is something that of course needs proper checking. But the Ethiktool tries to do its best for suggesting to people that things are implausible, and when they're really very obviously implausible, it will do its job and warn people. So let's say that in the data collection section, I had said that I'm recording people. I'm video recording them while they are doing that speech processing task, because I want to see the anger in their face when they don't understand something or whatever I want to do. I'm doing video recordings, and then the data collection part is done. I just checked this box and entered my free text here, but you see an exclamation mark in the data privacy part. So let's navigate there, and it tells me that something is incorrect. If I choose recordings or pictures as the data collection method, it can't be true that the research data themselves are not person-related, right? I have to answer that I have now person-related research data because people can be recognized on the video files as long as they're in raw format. So I need to change my answer here. Then the inconsistency disappears, but a lot of missing entries are now, because now I need to tell, of course, how am I anonymizing them and who has access to these data. So which personal data am I processing for answering the research questions? I'm using video recordings. And does it include any special categories of personal data? We can think about that in a video, not necessarily. But if I say I had chosen that I'm using fMRI brain scans, then it would be obvious that there is some health data involved. So, but for now, let's only choose the video recordings. And then I'm asked, how am I anonymizing that? And so I have multiple options, and some of them make sense, some of them don't make sense. So some of them go together with video recordings, and the tool will also guide the process there. So I could irreversibly distort the video, or I could convert the video, like transcribing what I've seen. It's more likely for audio recordings, but could also happen for video recordings. And then I'm asked, after I have distorted the video, am I also storing the original data, so the raw video files, or am I deleting them immediately? If I delete them immediately, I have to say how long does it take until it's being deleted. If I say I'm storing them, I need to say for what purpose. So just for quality assurance, it will tell me, well, please weigh the quality assurance against data protection. If I say I want to reuse them, then of course I need to explain to my participants for what purpose do I want to reuse them. I want to use them in teaching, then the participants need to give extra consent to that because they might be visible to other student bodies. There are various options that can be chosen here. And again, the tool will guide you through the process of doing everything properly. So let's say we do choose the teaching example, then it will ask me, do people have to consent to their videos being used for teaching, or can they choose to consent? And if I say they can choose to consent, then here in the consent form, it added a new line: I agree to the storage and use of my personal research data for use in teaching. And the person can specifically say yes or no here, depending on whether they are fine with that or not. If I say it's mandatory, then they don't have this choice, but it says in the annex on data processing that the data will be used for teaching. The research data are, as originally collected, are shared with students in the context of teaching. So that whatever happens is always reflected in the documents, and there can be no mismatch. And if I choose optional, then it says the same sentence, but with the addition, if you agree to that, so that the people are again pointed to the fact that they have choice, they have the liberty to choose whether they want that or not. Okay, so that was a small insight into the features that this tool offers. I very much hope that you found that interesting, and I very much invite you to try it for yourself and explore our Ethiktool. Please feel free to check whether it covers everything that you would need to be covered in research, and especially in terms of data processing. And we are very happy to receive feedback at this email address, ethiktool@tuchemnitz.de. And if you have the feeling, if you're part of an ethics review board and you would consider using that software in your ethics review board, please feel very free to approach me. As I said, we will make it freely available to any interested review board, and I would be very happy to discuss that with you. And now, of course, I look forward to discussing with all of you about your impressions of the tool and of the whole process. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention.